Hello, everyone, and welcome to our sixth episode. Today, I'm going to talk about something that I'm asked about virtually every week based on my experience. And I'm going to give you the good news, and then I'm going to give you the bad news. And I usually like to say the bad news first, but the question of the week was why franchise? What's the value of franchising? And first, I'm going to tell you what's the good part, and then I'm going to tell you the complexity and the difficulty of why you should franchise. So let me start by saying that I often say, and it's in my book, of course, that the second biggest mistake I ever made at Jackson Hewitt was that I didn't start franchising from day one. You may recall that when we started and bought Mel Jackson, and Mel Jackson had 6 locations. And our goal, I told my investors, we raised $129,000 and bought it August 14th of 1982. And I told my investors our goal is to be bigger than H&R Block. Well, at the time, H&R Block had 9,000 locations, and the second largest tax preparation firm had 200. So obviously there's a void in the market because there's always room for 2 or 3 players, whether it's back then it was General Motors and Ford and Chrysler, Dodge Chrysler. There was McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's. There's always room for 2 or 3 players. And there was no large number 2. But I set a very hairy audacious goal of adding 8,995 offices to get to 9,001. So we bought 6 offices, and by tax season, that was in August, by tax season 1983, we had 11 offices. And I don't usually tell but this part of the story, but we were on the 4 largest Navy bases in the area, which are 4 of the largest in the country. There was the Navy base put out a bid for to go on site onto the Navy bases and prepare tax returns. And they controlled the fees, they controlled how much you had to pay the preparers, but they were doing about 3,000 returns on those 4 bases. And so we bid and won that contract. And so we added 4 Navy bases and 1 more storefront. So in January, 5 months later, we had 11 locations. Second year, we again had the contract for the Navy base. And now we opened 4 more locations, so 4 more storefronts. So in the second year, we had 11 storefronts in the 4 Navy bases. And going into the third tax season, we were looking at having 22 locations. We were adding 7 storefronts. And I said to myself that, wow, if I go at this rate, if I go from, and that's pretty good growth, going from 6 to 11 in 5 months, after 17 months having 15, and then after 29 months having 22, 2.5 years having 22 locations. That's pretty good growth. Most people would be happy going from 6 to 22. But our goal was 9,000 offices, 9,001 offices. And so I realized I was going to be about 600 years old at that rate if I was going to build at that rate, that I would have to be 600 years old to get to 9,000 offices. So I said, well, what are we going to do different? Well, now I looked at what H&R Block had done, and I was there. I was there when they grew from 3,000 offices in 1969 to 9,000 offices when I left in 1981. And most of it was by franchise. Back then, when I started, over 90% of their offices were franchised. They eventually bought them back and they became company offices. But initially, they were were franchised offices. And I said, okay, let's copy the growth of what H&R Block did. And we then we grew exponentially. We went from 22 to 49. Then we went from 49 to 200. Then we went from 200 to 300, 300 to 500. I mean, we grew exponentially. And today, Jackson Hewitt has 6,000 offices, $1 billion company, and they're almost all franchised. So what do you get when you franchise versus company owned? Well, you get a couple things. Number one is, and I say this, and this may sound harsh, but what you do is you get great people who pay you to work for you. When someone acquires a franchise, they give you money, and then they give you money ongoing. And so you get a high quality person that acts like an owner that is paying you to work for you. It costs you nothing. So they're paying to rent an office, the security deposit, the advertising, they're paying all the costs in building your system. So you have far less investment. Plus you have great people, and you have great people on the ground. You know, it's one thing here, I'm in Virginia Beach, and it's one thing to manage people that are in Virginia Beach. But when you want to go to Los Angeles or Chicago or Dallas, or let alone Honolulu, where do you get good people that you can manage from afar at a reasonable cost? Because all of the businesses are startup businesses. You're not going to be rolling in cash the first year. And typically in every industry, it takes 3 to 5 years before you start making good cash flow. And so you can't afford a high priced employee. If I open an office in Los Angeles, I can't afford a high priced employee because don't have the cash flow to support it. But if I get a franchisee there, then they pay me. I get a high quality person that pays me to open an office and all the costs. So I don't have all the costs involved with opening the office. And I have someone that not only are they high quality, but they act like owners. In my career, I've had, out of all the thousands of employees I've had, less than 5% act like owners. But out of the 5,200 franchisees that I've had, 95% of them act like owners. Yes, not all of them act like owners, but 95% of them act like owners. So I get, when I franchise, I get a high quality person who acts like an owner that pays all the expenses. I mean, what a racket that is. That's fantastic. Now, the catch is I have to have a replicable system, and I have to create a industry leading system. I have to have a system of doing business that's industry leading, and it has to be replicable. And it has to be replicable by, I'm not going to say average people, but I am going to say for people that aren't the smartest, they're not the smartest person in their class. They're not the most experienced person in their area. They're not the highest educated person in their area. Because at the end of the day, when you bring in 5,200 franchisees, you're going to have a lot of people that need assistance. They're above average typically, but they're not PhDs and they're not Einstein. You know, I looked at Einstein's. I was having a conversation just yesterday with someone about. I overheard someone say this week that the smartest people don't get rich, and I thought to myself, well, that may be true. And you know, I doubt the great leaders like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and I doubt they were the smartest person in their class. In fact, some of them didn't even go to college or complete college. I mean, I know Steve Jobs, just read recently, he dropped out after his first semester because he was adopted and his parents were spending all their life savings on this expensive school. And he stayed around campus for another year or so, and he attended some classes. And this school was specialized in calligraphy, and so he took that class, and he said he didn't take the class. He just sat in the class and didn't pay for it. And it said that was shaped the Apple computer. That type of detail helped him build the greatest platform for PCs that's ever been developed. And it was sitting in a class for free at the university. But back to so you get all these people, and they're working for you. And now let's talk about some of the problems, because what if you've never been in franchising before, if you're a normal officer of a corporation, then you don't understand the difficulty of managing a franchise system versus employees. Most of us that have been in management, virtually everyone that's been in management, has managed employees, and most have not managed franchisees. Well, franchisees are not employees, and you don't have the same relationship with a franchisee that you do have with an employee. Maybe you should, because franchisees have autonomy, they have independence, they have freedom, they are often mavericks and renegades. And my philosophy is that if both of us think alike, one of us is useless. And since I'm boss, I get to pick you. So I think that as a franchisor, you face a whole different realm of problems than if you're an employer. And so most people don't get that. And what happens is that when people ask me if they should franchise, my first answer is no, don't franchise. And I'm going to tell you why. And then and that's generic answer. And the good news is, after my presentation, and I tell you the good news and the bad news, and it's all generic. It's all generic. And after this presentation, if you have questions for me about your particular situation, I will be happy to give you guidance on your particular situation. But what I'm saying today is generic. And here's a caution that in the last 10 years ago, there were 4,000 franchisors in the United States. Today, there are about 4,000 franchisors in the United States. And every year we read about, hear about, there are about 300 or 400 new franchises that are formed. And so 300 or 400 are added. Well, if the number hasn't changed in 10 years from 4,000 to 4,000, how could you add 300 or 400 years mathematically and have that be true? Well, the only way that can be true, obviously, is if 300 or 400 fail. Most franchisors fail. And this number is, even though I've known it for a while, this number is striking and so surprising that if you look at all the franchisors in the United States, the 4,000 franchisors, and I asked you, how many units does it need to take for you to be as a franchisor, to be in the top 50%? Obviously, there's the huge organizations like Subway and McDonald's, and there's huge organizations that have 25, 30,000 franchisees. They're even, well, Jackson Hewitt is 23rd largest franchisor, and they just have 6,000. So there's a big drop off. And to be in the top percent, I don't remember the number, top 10%. But the last number I think was 400. But to be in the top 50%, you only need 20 locations. And that's failure. In franchising, the typical benchmark that I hear scuttlebutt around the world and the franchising industry, which I've been in for 55 years, is most people use the number of 100 locations. Until you get to 100 locations, you're not successful. But average is only 20. And that's because, and I'm going to tell you why, and then I'm going to tell, well, let me take you through what I've seen. And I didn't really realize this when I was at Jackson Hewitt. I was focused. When I was at H&R Block, I was focused on H&R Block. When I was at Jackson Hewitt, I was focused on Jackson Hewitt. And when I was at Liberty, I was focused at Liberty. So I didn't know those numbers. I didn't know that all these franchisors were failing. It didn't occur to me to check, because remember, Liberty got to 4,000 locations in 12 years, top 10 fastest growing ever. When I was at Jackson Hewitt and at Liberty, I was routinely every year in the top 10 fastest growing franchisors in the country. So it never occurred to me to check what the poor performers were doing, until we started Loyalty Brands. And once we started Loyalty Brands and we began looking at opportunities to partner with existing franchisors to build a franchise chain, build another $500 million company like I did with Jackson Hewitt and Liberty, it didn't occur to me what the general population of franchisors was going through. And I learned, and we partnered with we looked at over 60 opportunities, and we partnered with now we have 8, but we've already divorced a handful of them because of what I'm going to tell you, and what generally happens. And that is that what I've found, and this is true in virtually every one of the 50 or 60 opportunities I've looked at, is you have an entrepreneur who is generally extraordinary. They're doing a great job. They're making good profit in their mom and pop business. So they're good at what they do. And no one's good at everything, but they're good at their mom and pop business, whether it's a pizza business, whether it's a 2 men in a truck business. They have this concept, and they're really good as a mom and pop, and they're making good money. They're typically all making mid six figures. So they're making $250,000 to $750,000 a year. So most of them in the $250,000 to $500,000 range profit a year. And people come to them and say, I'd like to do this, or why don't you franchise this? I love this pizza. I love the experience. I love the experience I've had at your company. Why don't you franchise? I'd even buy one of these. And so you start getting it in your head that you're capable of more, and that you're, as an entrepreneur, you want to be all you can be. You want to seize the day, carpe diem, seize the day. You want to be all you can be. And so you decide that you want to franchise, that you want to grow. And you can, because most people can't, when they grow through a chain of locations, you begin to lack capital. I mean, when you think about it, if you have a pizzeria, the startup cost on a pizzeria is hundreds of thousands of dollars. So if you open up a second one, you're in for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Whereas if you got a franchise, they put in all the hundreds of thousands. So you don't have to put up anything. So it typically costs about $100,000 in non-marketing expense, which includes drawing up a dark document, attorney fees, um, operating manual, setting up training, and just getting ready costs about $100,000, and then you spend another couple $100,000 in marketing, and then so you've got, call it $300,000. You lay out that over a year or two, and you're starting franchise. Well, you don't get enough franchises quickly enough to pay for your expenses of your staff and office and expenses and so forth. It takes typically 3 to 5 years for a franchisor to begin to cash flow positive from royalties. So you do get some cash from franchise fees, but that just covers your expenses. When you hire a business broker or a salesperson to bring in new franchisees, that the average new franchisor charges about $40,000 per franchise. That's all gone in paying the broker fee to get the lead and to bring the sales lead in and signed and ready for training. That takes your 40,000 is gone. So all you have is the royalties. And remember, you have new stores that aren't producing at peak levels. It takes them a while to get brand name and to get at peak levels. So they're at reduced levels while they're building up to their peak revenue. So think of, you have this mom and pop, you're going great, and now you step out. Okay, I'm going to franchise. And remember, one a day, over 3 to 400 a year are making this decision and coming to market. And they virtually all have this situation. Number one is that they've invested 300,000 and they didn't have just, I mean, it was hard. It wasn't easy for them to get 300,000 to do it. So it's not like they could write a check. They have, not many people have 300,000 sitting in the bank. So they're investing that over time, and they need the revenue from the mom and pop to pay for their living costs that they're used to. They're used to a high quality of living because they're making huge, good salary and all the benefits from being self-employed. And so they're used to living well, and they're not prepared to tighten their belt and step back. So they need that revenue from the mom and pop, and they've invested $300,000, and now it's gonna take 3 to 5 years to begin being able to pay themselves out of the franchise system. And so now so the first problem is they are doing two things. They're running their mom and pop, and they're running want to be soon, someday, a national or international. They want to have a national or international company, but they have a foot in both camps. And the Chinese say that man who chases two rabbits catches none. And they don't do a great job of it because they're not full-time, not only working in it full-time, but mentally they're not doing it full-time. They're not learning on how to run a national company. It's totally different not only running a franchise company, but if I'm sitting in Virginia Beach running a office or multi-unit pizzas, I have 3 pizza locations. I'm only used to the Virginia Beach market. I don't know Chicago and Los Angeles and Seattle and Miami, I have to learn about national presence and national marketing if I'm going to do a good job running a national company. So I don't have time to learn because I'm in I don't have time to focus on building the national company, which I have no experience in because I've always been regional and local. And so that's a difficult challenge, but way more difficult is dealing with franchisees. That is that's a it's an art and science combined. There's no great formula there's for doing a good job with franchisees, because franchisees are a varied lot. I mean, they come from all walks of life. They come from all income levels. They all nationalities. The best franchisees that I brought in over the years, that the average best performers are first generation Americans that have come, and that's because they've left their country, and those that are legally leave their country and come to the United States, they're the elite of their country. They can afford to come. They're the smartest. They're the most experienced, and they're the most accomplished. But if you're a doctor in a foreign country and you come to the United States, you can't be a doctor unless you get another degree in the United States. If you're a dentist, you can't be a dentist. You can't attorney, you can't be an attorney. You can't practice in the United States without getting more degrees. And so we have these accomplished people that come in that are looking for opportunity, and they need to do it through acquiring businesses. And so the best people are those people that come in that are looking to seize the American dream, and they're very accomplished and very hard work. But the relationship between a franchisee and franchisor is different than employee-employer. And maybe, as I said earlier, maybe the employee-employer should be more like a franchise relationship. But I think with me, it is, because I believe that unlike most of the executives I've seen in my career and watched in other companies, and even some in my own companies, I've had to fight this. Most think that the person that works for them is almost like a slave. Like, I give you an order and your job to fill that order and follow those instructions, instead of a partnership. That it's to me, it's more of a partnership. Yes, I'm the boss and I get to make the final decision, but at the end of the day, not only do you have to make me happy, I have to make you happy. And that's why we call it and that's why I've been so successful in keeping so many great employees for so many years. And that's why we have the name of the company is Loyalty Brands, because I have so many people loyal to me, because I always want what's best for people, and I always understand that if I want the customers to be treated as number one, I have to treat the employees as number one. So it's more like a partnership than, certainly far more like a partnership than slavery. And I think I've seen too many executives treat their employees almost like slaves. So there's a lot of things going on with a franchisee. They're a customer, they're a partner, and they're a cooperative group that all have to work together to grab brand name and market share. And if you're afraid of criticism, you can't be in the franchise business, because franchisees will complain no matter what you do. Someone's going to complain about it. And so if I gave, I guess if employees complain too, but they're much more quiet about it. You're always going to have your squeaky wheel franchisees who are going to complain about you, and they can be very toxic. They will go to other franchisees and try to group up against you as the franchisor. There's a us versus them philosophy, and it's sort of like if you have a company. I'm not sure. I've never been in a company that had a union, but it's sort of like it's the union against management. I mean, no matter what you try to do, and how much time you spend getting working with franchisees, there's always a us versus them philosophy. We just had at our convention, I try to, at our franchise convention, I try to have only awards go to franchisees as opposed to company employees. But I've for a long time, I've had all the way since in my whole career, less at Block, but certainly at Jackson Hewitt, more at Liberty, and now more at Loyalty. We have employees that are both employees and franchisees, or their spouse is a franchisee, or their children are franchisees. So we had complaints this weekend because it was our convention, because the CEO of of Zoom and Grumman, her daughter she's very well liked, a great young lady, and I've known her since she was 7 years old or 8 years old. Sandy's been with me since 1 week before 9/11, and so I've known Katie since she was 7, 8 years old, and Sandy used to, back in 2002 and 1 and 2 and 3, she used to send me. Sandy's not good at math, so she'd send her daughter down to the school bus dropped her off at the office, because Sandy couldn't afford a babysitter back then, or didn't want one. I'm not sure why. So the school bus dropped her at the office like 3 or 4 o'clock, and I mean, many days she would come down to my office, and I would help her with her homework, her math homework, and Mr. John would help her with her math homework. And so now she's over 30. She's just got married a couple of years ago. She has her first child, and she's a Zoom and Grumman franchisee. And we have an award for area representative of the year, which area representative is kind of you own, instead of just one territory, you own many territories. And so we had a contest for area representative of the year, and she won hands down. Well, there was grumbling in the audience that, come to find out, that she was the daughter of the CEO, and that doesn't seem right. Now it was voted on by them. No corporate employee voted. She won in a landslide, but there was grumbling. Another example I use is if I said to every franchisee, and I'm going to send you a check for $10,000. We just had such a great year that I'm going to send every franchisee $10,000. Well, you would wonder how anyone could complain about that. But what happens is, let's say you have 100 franchisees, and the top 10 are making $1 million plus a year. And then you have the bottom 10 are brand new and they're losing money, or they're not following the system and losing money. So you have 100 franchisees, you send them all $10,000. You would think that you would get, texts and emails and thank you cards and back. But what happens is the top 10 say, I'm paying you hundreds of thousands of dollars of royalties per year. And that little guy is only paying you the minimum royalty of $5,000 a year. So if he's getting $10,000, I should get $100,000. So the top people are complaining because they feel they're giving back more, they're doing more, they've been with you longer, they're more successful, they're writing bigger checks to you, so they should get more. Now the little guy that's brand new and hasn't made it yet and hasn't made a profit yet says, if you that guy's making over $1 million profit a year, he doesn't need $10,000. I need the money. I could use. I should have his money. I should be getting 20,000 if he's getting 10,000 because I need money. That person doesn't need money. So, my favorite Shakespeare is this above all, to thine own self be true. You have to do what's right. And in a franchise system, unlike a corporate system, you get way more criticism. You get way more criticism. And fortunately for me, I learned to embrace criticism long ago. Because having brought in 5,200 franchisees with hundreds of thousands of employees, I'm one of the most criticized people in the country and in the world, the most criticized. But I also have a fanatical obsession to win. To win, I have to have the best system. And to have the best system, I have to be improving, because there's no system that is going to work forever. You need to improve your system if it's going to be the best system in the industry. And that's our job as a franchisor. And when I said earlier that people pay me to work for me, well, they're not going to pay me to work for me if I'm not going to give them the best system, the best, which includes support, which includes training, which includes marketing, which includes lowest cost of customer acquisition. If I'm not giving them that, they're not going to work for me very long. And so that's a huge responsibility. If you're a mom and pop pizza place, you may or may not have the best system, but you can exist without the best system in the industry. But if you're going to go national against Pizza Hut and Papa John's and all the big guys, Domino's, then you better have a differentiator. You better have a great system that's replicable, that people can follow. You can't be ordinary. You have to be. It forces you to be top of your game, top of the game, top of the heap, and your franchisees hold you accountable to that, or you'll be one of the 300 or 400 franchisors that goes out of business every year, because you're not creating the opportunity and this systemic solution to all the problems that happen in your industry. And so what I've seen is virtually every person that's great at being a mom and pop, when they when they take off that hat and put on the hat that says franchise CEO of the franchise company, they can't make the transition. They can't make that transition. They're not good at it. They're good at being a mom and pop. And you have to be all you can be in life, you have to find out what your niche is. And their niche is the mom and pop, not to be a franchise owner. So in the situations where we divorced our our partners, once we partner with a company, they just couldn't make the transition. They didn't have the time, which that was a little bit of it, but they didn't have the capacity of dealing with franchisees to make them to help them be successful. It's one thing that I'm successful when I'm an owner of a business and I'm there and I might 20 employees, 50 employees, 100 employees, and I have a restaurant or a real estate firm or whatever I have, tax office, and that's one thing. But when you go national and you're supporting other people, and you need the respect of everyone and the cooperation, and you need to overcome the naysayers, because you're always going to have naysayers. You're always going to have people that are undermining you and criticizing you. Everything you do is under a microscope. So, and um, it's a whole different skill set. And so again, back as I started this presentation on what's the advantage of franchising? Wow, what a great vehicle it is. And people like Ray Kroc and Dave from Wendy's and Colonel Sanders and there's and Fred DeLuca of Subway. There's been some even Henry Block and Richard Block. They were good at working, building a franchise system. Now at H&R Block, they got bad at it. Once Henry left, and he left long ago. He left by the time I left in 1981. He had already he was about leaving right about then, and by the time I tried to sell my software in 1982, Tom Block was CEO, his son. So he was only there from 55 until about 80. But once he left, and then Tom left in 95, once Henry Block left, the shift turned against franchisees, and I call them suits came in, and they began treating the franchisees like numbers. And the simple secret, simple sauce of how do you have a successful franchise system, it comes down to one thing. And if you've never thought about it or heard it, this is going to be hard for you to believe that franchisors can fail, because it's this simple, that it's happy, successful franchisees. That's it. Now, you would think that everyone would get that if I'm going to start a franchise system, I have to understand that if I make money and they don't, it's not going to work. Or if they make money and I don't, it's not going to work. So you would think that's just so obvious, so obvious. But a franchisor is failing every day. There's one failing today, every day of the year, because they don't get that simple idea. And when I left, and even like private equity is not often not good at understanding that. To them, it's a numbers game, and the franchisees are like robots. You press a button and they're going to do it. No, that's not how. That might be how some employees do it, but that's not how franchisees do it. And so in my headquarters at Liberty Tax, before I left 6 years ago, it said big, huge letters. They were over a foot tall, 2 feet tall. It said, "Happy, successful franchisees." Sold it to private equity, and they whitewashed the wall. Within 2 months, I don't know how long exactly it took them, but within 60 days, that was gone from the wall. They whitewashed the wall because they didn't get that simple concept. So again, franchising is a great vehicle. Second biggest mistake I ever made was by not franchising it from day one at Jackson Hewitt. But certainly the first day we started Liberty, and every day we were franchising, and we've only been involved with franchising at Loyalty. Love franchising, but it's much more complex, much more difficulty, requires different relationship. And again, my final comments are I guess that if you still, after listening to this presentation, if you still wonder if you want a franchise, if you have something that's successful and replicable, and you have differentiators that separate you from your competition, and you wonder if it's for you, then you can talk to me personally. I'll be glad to spend some time and very quickly assess with you whether the there is an opportunity to franchise your particular business. So, having said that, I'm going to wish everyone a good day. And thank you for listening, and look forward to talking to you again next week. Have a great day, everyone.